Chairman, and I think they're going to be calling votes in a few minutes, so I'm going to be fairly brief. Based on the SBA's response to the Midwest floods, are there additional changes that may be needed to improve disaster response plan?
Could you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
Yes. Based on the floods in
Yes.
the Midwest, are there any additional changes that may be needed to your disaster response plan at the SBA?
Well,
Or do you think it's working well?
Well, it's working well, but I'd like to explain why it's working well. Each time we experience a disaster, we keep improving the process. But let me tell you the reform that has occurred in the disaster operation. Not only have we been training for the past 2 years through simulations and also engaging the integrating ODA, this is the Office of Disaster Assistance, to the SBA, we have increased the capacity either in the automation, reservists, personnel, I should say, the reservists from ODA, and also fully engaging the SBA personnel. So you're talking about what used to be 1,000 to 3,000 employees, now immediately employing and engaging up to 3,000 employees in disaster recovery. So we have an electronic application that has immediate interface with the disaster victims. We have increased reservists deployed to have a partnership with the FEMA members. So now you have joint field offices. And we also have the daily review of the disaster areas and their operations. So every one office has to report back on a daily basis. We conduct conference calls at 9 in the morning to address any exceptions. So I believe we are a fully engaged agency, and if there's room for improvement, I'd be glad to speak with you on areas that you think we may be able to perfect.
Those daily reviews that you do at 9 a.m., is that something new since the hurricanes of 2005?
Yes. We included in our disaster response plan that was submitted to Congress the need to assemble what we call a Disaster Assistance Information Center or Council. And we feed all the activities, results, open issues, at that session. And so all of the SBA leadership is all hands on deck. And we review either the COOP plan or the Office of Disaster Assistance deployment, any of the communications, any of the press releases, and anything else that bubbles up. We also are very concerned about our own employees, in addition to our infrastructure, to make sure that we give them the necessary tools so that they can get back up to business and provide the services to all the victims in their communities. So it's a double-edged sword. We have to not only think of the local community, but we also have to think of the SBA facilities that are in 68 particular areas. We have 68 district offices.
Thank you. We have just gone through another disaster with Hurricane Ike. As you went through that disaster, did that affect your ability to work with the people and businesses in the Midwest?
Absolutely. Not only are we utilizing the headquarters personnel and the Office of Disaster Assistance, we are fully integrated with our resource partners as well as with FEMA. So our capacity has not only expanded through the electronic loan application, the resources, but definitely the partnerships, the collaboration with other agencies. So yes, we're very much engaged with the Chambers of Commerce. They're much more accessible to us, and we're accessible to them, as well as we developed an MOU with the Red Cross. So I think we have non-for-profit, for-profit, and also public service.
Do you have enough resources to handle two major issues like the floods and the hurricanes at the same time?
I'm glad you asked that question. We have a capacity in our phone center to receive 20,000 calls a day. We have, I mentioned in my testimony that we have an electronic loan capacity of 5,600 applications a day. We have a ramp-up capability of a couple thousand employees, whether they're reservists, national, or local. And so, to answer your question, we have currently, based on the reforms and all of our process engineering, the capacity to handle up to 250,000 applications. That would be at the cusp of a level 2 and a level 3, so we're watching that daily. We thought we were going to hit a level 3 with Ike, and we were able to manage it quite adequately.
Does SBA have any one individual, if people in the Midwest or in Iowa are having problems, that they could contact for assistance?
Yes, as part of the Farm Bill, and we had proactively identified an individual, you may know him as Admiral Steve Smith. He is the Associate Administrator of our Disaster Assistance or Recovery Office, and so he's responsible for the strategy and planning of our disaster operation. So he's accessible. And so because he looks at not only the deployment of daily resources, but he's also responsible for the long-term recovery after disaster. So Steve Smith, and Congressman Braley knows, I'm accessible, and so is the Acting Administrator Burwell. And we have here Herb Mitchell, who is the Director of the Office of Disaster Assistance, and he's testified many times, I understand, before this committee.
I have one last question. Was the SBA able to implement any of the disaster provisions of the Farm Bill in responding to the floods in the Midwest?
Yes, there were approximately 13 points, provisions, and we have implemented all but 6 or 7 of them, and they're the most complicated ones, and that has to do with the private lender loan program. We do have a working group that's very much engaged in developing some regs. We are talking to the lending partners to understand and realize either the cost or the capacity of these lending institutions that could support us during a catastrophic situation. We have not had to employ any of that capacity outside of the SBA. I should indicate, one, that we've updated our disaster response plan, and it's an ongoing work. I mentioned Admiral Steve Smith, who is now on board and has, I think, about 2 months under his belt. He probably thinks it's 6 months under his belt, but it's 2 months under his belt. We have regular reports to Congress. We have the non-collateralized loan limits, as I mentioned in my testimony, from 14,000 to 10,000. I'm sorry, to 14,000 from 10,000. We also have put in the business loan caps at $2 million from $1.5 million, and the other 2 provisions of the net earnings clause, as well as the nonprofits, are now eligible for the EIDL. So we made significant progress in that area.
This time I would recognize Congressman Loebsack for his